In the days that followed Harry's storming exit, the silence from Montecito became deafening. Meghan Markle, known for swiftly curating narratives in the wake of royal controversies, issued no public comment, no Instagram post, and no carefully staged leak to sympathetic media outlets. The absence of her voice was almost as loud as Harry's outburst itself. Royal watchers speculated that Meghan's silence was deliberate, part of a calculated strategy to distance herself from the chaos. Yet others argued it revealed cracks in the Sussex brand, that even Meghan understood this was a battle she couldn't spin in their favor. But the media was not willing to wait for Meghan's response. Tabloids dissected every angle of the footage: Harry's contorted expression, Pascal's calm defiance, Graham Norton's awkward attempts to salvage the moment. Opinion columns drew comparisons between Harry and disgraced royals of the past, painting him as a man obsessed with relevance yet perpetually undermined by his own behavior. British outlets, long critical of the Duke, relished in his humiliation, while even sympathetic American magazines ran with headlines describing him as volatile, ungrateful, and tone-deaf. The narrative turned harsher still when former palace aides began resurfacing old stories of Harry's temper behind closed doors. Anonymous insiders claimed the Norton incident was no anomaly, but rather a public glimpse of the tantrum staff had endured for years. What the world saw, one source told a major newspaper, is the Harry we dealt with on a regular basis, angry, entitled, and unwilling to hear no. Whether true or exaggerated, these revelations only reinforced the public perception that Harry's outburst was not an isolated misstep, but part of a long-running pattern. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal's reputation was soaring to heights even he hadn't anticipated. Fan accounts flooded social media with edits portraying him as the unflinching truth-teller who dared to stand up to a prince. Hashtags like Pascal the Brave and Royal Rejection trended for days. In Hollywood, industry insiders whispered about how the confrontation had given Pascal an unexpected aura of cultural gravitas. He was no longer just a beloved actor. He had become a figure who symbolized the public's growing disillusionment with privilege. Studios, sensing his star power had only grown, reportedly rushed to secure him for upcoming projects. For Harry, however, the fallout extended beyond headlines. Invitations to certain Hollywood events began to quietly dry up. A-list circles that had once welcomed the Sussexes as novelty royalty now viewed them with skepticism. Harry's outburst, far from cementing his place in celebrity culture, reminded the world that he was still shackled to the demands of monarchy, unable to shed the entitlement that came with it. The irony was cruel. In trying to force respect, he had destroyed the very respect he craved. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides were said to be furious, not because Harry had embarrassed himself. He was no longer a working royal after all, but because the incident inevitably reflected back on the monarchy. Every time Harry insists on being treated as royalty while rejecting the responsibilities that come with it, he damages the institution. One royal insider lamented, "It's an impossible contradiction." King Charles, according to sources, viewed the Norton debacle as a confirmation of his worst fears, that his son was incapable of managing life outside the firm without descending into spectacle. Meghan, for her part, finally resurfaced days later, but not with statement. Instead, paparazzi conveniently captured her leaving a chic cafe in California, smiling effortlessly, dressed in a perfectly curated casual outfit. The images circulated widely, sparking speculation that Meghan was attempting to project calm detachment, as though Harry's public implosion had nothing to do with her. But critics weren't fooled. Many saw it as yet another carefully staged distraction, a subtle way to remind the world that she was still in control of the narrative, even if Harry was unraveling on live TV. What made the situation even more damning for Harry was the reaction from younger generations. On TikTok, clips of his storm out became viral fodder, often remixed with mocking captions and sound effects. Teenagers and young adults, once a demographic that had sympathized with the Sussexes' claims of victimhood, now laughed at his meltdown. "He acts like a child who didn't get his way," one viral post read, racking up millions of views. The ridicule was brutal, swift, and unforgiving. Perhaps the most devastating blow, however, came from within Harry's own camp. Anonymous friends told the press they were deeply concerned about his inability to manage public pressure. One described him as living in a perpetual state of grievance, always expecting deference without realizing how much goodwill he squandered. These whispers, combined with Meghan's strategic silence, painted a picture of a man increasingly isolated, even from those closest to him. As the dust began to settle, it became increasingly clear that the Graham Norton debacle was not just another passing embarrassment. It was a turning point. For Prince Harry, the meltdown on live television had crystallized what critics had been warning for years. His obsession with titles, status, and respect was no longer endearing nor justifiable. It was exhausting. What once earned him sympathy now drew derision, and the Norton episode became a symbol of his unraveling. The real sting for Harry was how quickly the narrative slipped from his control. In previous controversies, he and Meghan had managed to reposition themselves as victims of an unforgiving press or a toxic royal institution. But this time, the footage told the story in real time. There was no carefully edited documentary, no sympathetic interviewer shaping the narrative. Just millions of viewers watching a prince lose his temper and walk offstage because a Hollywood actor refused to call him royal. The optics were disastrous, and even the most sympathetic media outlets found it impossible to defend. Across Britain, the humiliation carried a sharp edge. Newspapers blasted him with headlines like, "Not so regal after all," and "Harry the humorless." Even in America, where he and Meghan had built a second act as celebrity activists, the press turned cold. Entertainment outlets that once fawned over the Sussexes began questioning whether the couple had lost their relevance entirely. The Hollywood Reporter ran a biting editorial that asked bluntly, "If Prince Harry can't handle a late-night talk show without storming out, how can he handle the global platform he claims to want?" But perhaps the cruelest blow came from within the royal family itself. Sources close to Buckingham Palace hinted that William, Harry's estranged brother, had privately mocked the incident, joking that Pedro Pascal had done what the firm could never manage, cut Harry down to size without lifting a finger. Whether true or not, the quip spread quickly through palace corridors and into the press, fueling the narrative of Harry as a man who demanded respect but was incapable of commanding it. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal's star continued to rise in a way that must have infuriated Harry. What was meant to be a fun, light-hearted television appearance had elevated Pascal into a symbol of authenticity and strength. His refusal to bend to Harry's demand was replayed as an act of principle, proof that celebrity and common sense could triumph over aristocratic entitlement. Pascal, already beloved by fans, had now become something larger. The man who humiliated a prince without breaking a sweat. Behind the scenes, Meghan was said to be frustrated but unsurprised. Insiders whispered that she had warned Harry against pushing too hard for deference in Hollywood, where the rules of fame differ from monarchy. "You can't demand a crown in a room full of stars," one Hollywood insider said, summing up the cultural clash. But Harry, stubborn and unwilling to accept that his royal status meant less outside the UK, ignored the advice and paid the price. What made the humiliation so lasting was how it exposed the hollowness of the Sussex project. Their carefully curated image as global leaders, campaigners, and humanitarians was overshadowed by the simple fact that Harry still craved royal treatment. For audiences, the contradiction was glaring. Here was a man who claimed to have rejected the monarchy, yet bristled with rage when denied the very reverence that came with it. The hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. In the weeks that followed, Harry's team scrambled to regain control of the narrative. Stories began to appear in select outlets about a commitment to mental health and courage in standing up for dignity. But no matter how hard they tried to shift the conversation, the image of Harry storming out of Norton's studio lingered. Memes continued to circulate. Late-night comedians mocked him relentlessly, and clips of Pascal's calm response continued to rack up millions of views. Perhaps most damning of all, Hollywood insiders began whispering that Harry was becoming radioactive. Invitations to major industry events slowed. Projects once rumored for Sussexes seemed to vanish, and Netflix, already said to be frustrated with their underperforming deals, reportedly grew more cautious about investing further in them. "You can't build a brand around someone who's as thin-skinned," one executive remarked bluntly. For Harry, the humiliation wasn't just a PR blunder, it was a revelation. The Graham Norton incident revealed what many had suspected all along. That stripped to the palace walls, the titles and the staff protecting him from scrutiny, he was just another celebrity trying, and failing, to command respect in a world that had moved on. And as Pedro Pascal continued to ride the wave of public admiration, Harry was left facing the one truth he had fought hardest to avoid. That respect is earned, not demanded, and once lost, it is almost impossible to reclaim.